Hello everyone, Mr. Hathi here with another update for the summer exams 2021. Thank you very much for the questions that you put together last week. I'm going to try and answer them in 4 broad categories as best as I can. But before I start, 2 general points. Firstly, the answers I'm about to give you apply to most departments. There are some subjects that will be slightly different, but in broad terms, they will apply to most departments, but not every single aspect will apply to everyone. Your teachers will tell you more about what might apply to you specifically over the course of the next few weeks. Secondly, you may have seen in the media that we are still awaiting the guidance from the exam boards, and until we have that finalized guidance, it's impossible for us to make plans that are absolutely certain. So I can't say anything for 100% certainty until we have that guidance. We are expecting it by the end of March, so by the end of this term, but until that point, things are subject to change. But in broad terms, I think the plans have been set out and you will have been informed about large parts of this already. So let's go to the first series of questions. These were all on grading and how grades will be decided. You'll remember from the first video that I told you that grades will be awarded based on the standard that you are working at. This means knowing what you can do, what you understand, and what you can remember. So therefore, when it comes to grading, the same logic will apply. Your grades will be based on the standard that you are working at. So as you do a series of assessments, this does not mean that any one assessment is the single assessment that will be used as your grade. It also does not mean that we will use the highest grade or the average grade. What it means is your teachers will look holistically at the evidence that we have about you and the standard that you are working at and come together and at a grade that would most fairly and accurately represent the standard that you are working at. Some of you asked about attainment from previous years and will GCSE results have a bearing on the grade given in Year 12? The answer to that is I'm afraid not. The qualifications you are doing in A-level are different to those in GCSE. So even if you achieved a grade 9, let's say in Maths GCSE, that does not mean we can give you a grade A in your AS levels this year. The qualifications are different. The standard of GCSE and the standard of A-level and AS level are different, and we have to grade you on the standard that you are working at. So qualifications from previous courses will not necessarily reflect through into your current courses. There were several questions about assessments taken prior to lockdown. As I said to you, we are expecting to use the bulk of our evidence from the work that you produce in the coming weeks and months. As I also said, that does not mean we can't go back and look at previous evidence. It will be taken into account, but the bulk of the weighting will come from what's happening over the next few weeks and months in your assessments as you do them. The next series of questions were all about the assessments themselves, and I've grouped them into various different categories here. Several questions about why different subjects are doing different things. Well, every subject is different. Some subjects have coursework or NEA associated with them. Some have 2 exams at the end of the year, some have 3 exams at the end of the year. So your teachers will have devised a series of assessments that best suits the current position you are in. We're aware that not everyone has completed every aspect of your current course. For example, there may be some small topics in science or in history that you haven't studied, but that's fine. We won't assess you on those, as you know. We'll only assess you on what you have been taught so far. And that's why different subjects will do different things. In broad terms, however, we are looking to assess you as best as we possibly can on all the work that you have completed so far. Will they be consistent between all classes? We will try and make sure that this is the case, and in the vast majority of cases there will be consistency. This doesn't necessarily mean every class will do the same assessment. So for example, at GCSE you will be aware that Maths and Science and MFL are based on tiers. So there may be a foundation tier assessment for some pupils and a higher tier assessment for some other pupils. Most assessments will take place in the classroom, though we are looking at options for doing them in exam venues later on in the summer term. A question about grades from previous assessment weeks, and again, like I said, to the work in response to the work done in lockdown, it's not that we can't take it into account, we will take it into account, but we expect you to perform to a higher standard now that you're further through the course, and we'll be basing the bulk of the evidence on the coming weeks and months from the work that you do. A few of you asked about this first assessment that you're doing before the Easter holidays, and will it definitely count? The answer to that is yes, it forms a part of our evidence base, but it's not the be-all and end-all. For example, your first assessment might only cover a limited range of topics, whereas the assessments you do in the summer term may be full past papers, so the weighting between each one will be different. A few questions about will you get your work back? We know in the past we've always given you work back because it's vital that you see where you've gone wrong, you have the opportunity to do your corrections and also improve from having done those corrections. We are required this year to keep all the evidence that we are going to use to make these judgments. So it is very likely that you won't get your full paper back, certainly not on all of the occasions. That said, your teachers will give you feedback, so you will get mark schemes, you will get perhaps a blank copy of the paper again to go through and do your corrections or the bits that you know you got wrong. Your teachers will give you as much feedback as we possibly can, but we will have to keep the papers for evidence in case they're required by the exam boards. And then there was a series of questions on what about if you have to isolate. Now, we fully expect the vast majority of pupils to be in school for these assessments, but there will be places, there will be times when, for reasons beyond your control, you may have had to self-isolate and miss an exam. That's the great thing about doing a series of assessments. You've got many opportunities to show us the standard that you're working at, and no single assessment will be the be-all and end-all. We will use all the evidence that we have. In some cases, we may be able to use evidence for pupils who have done work at home, but this would be in extreme cases. But we are expecting the vast majority of pupils to be in school and complete their work and their assessments in school as normal. But we will obviously make accommodation and allowances for those who've had to self-isolate and miss exams. The next series of questions are all about work that you've completed in class or even at home. Can independent study or work count as evidence? There's nothing stopping work that's done at home or independent work or work from outside to be counted as evidence. We have to be sure and with a reasonable degree of certainty that the work is your own work, and that's where the difficulty lies with work taken place at home. There is no way we can guarantee or be reasonably sure that it's your own work and that you haven't used, for example, textbooks or past papers or mark schemes to help you. In some cases, we may be able to do this. For example, I know in some subjects in the recent lockdown, you actually had tests, timed tests. That's an example of where we can safely say, or reasonably safely say, that you have completed the work on your own. The paper from assessment week 1, some of you asked, does it matter if you've lost it? It doesn't actually matter if you've lost it, because we will have a record of your grade. And at that time, when we did assessment week 1, exams were due to go ahead. No one could have foreseen the cancellation and this process set up. So if you've actually lost your paper, don't worry about it. We will have a record of what assessment you sat and also the grade that you achieved. And then what about extra past papers or essays that you've written independently? Again, these can all count, but we have to be sure, or to a reasonable degree of certainty, that this is your own work, and that is where the issues lies. So we may use some of that evidence, but the bulk of the weighting, as I've said before, will be based on the assessments that you're about to sit in the coming weeks and months. Finally, a series of questions on what happens next and end-of-year arrangements. Lots of you inquired about study leave and what will happen after half-term in the summer. We're not anticipating any kind of pre-exam study leave per se. We're expecting you to be in school because your assessments will be staggered over the coming weeks and months, it's vital that you engage with your learning so that you do as well as you possibly can. There were several questions about summer holidays and will you need to attend over the summer holidays. No one will be required to attend in the actual school summer holidays after the 21st of July. But we are looking to put in place a program to support you through the transition in the second half of the summer term, and I'll get back to you with more details about that. It's likely to be on Microsoft Teams, it's likely to be accessible from home, but we're very conscious of the time that you've missed. Say for example, if you're finishing year 11 this year and going on to A-levels next year, that there may be some aspects that you haven't covered, and it's important that we help you bridge that gap from GCSE to A-level. We'll be finalising those plans in the next half term, and we'll get back to you with further details of what we expect. But just to be very clear, during the actual summer holidays itself, from the 21st of July onwards, no one will be required to be in school. And then there was a series of questions about the work that's already missed for exams coming up next year. So for example, if you're currently in year 10, you'll have missed large chunks of year 9 and year 10, and you will be anxious about your exams in year 11 in 2022. We will make sure we do everything we can. The exams regulator, Ofqual, will be consulting shortly on arrangements for the 2022 exams, and there may be some mitigation, there may be some topics that you don't have to study in recognition for the sheer amount of time that you've missed in school, but we'll provide you with details as we get them. It's likely to be some time, so for now, the best piece of advice is to work as hard as you possibly can and do as well as you can in these coming assessments over the next few weeks and months. That covers the bulk of the questions that were received last week. Thank you very much for putting those questions to your teachers, and I hope this video gives you the answers to as many of those as you possibly can. As I've said before, we are still waiting for the finalised guidance from the exam boards. We're expecting that later this term, so nothing can be absolutely certain, but you should by now have a clear idea as to what's happening between now and the summer half term, when we expect to complete all of your assessments by. As ever, if you do have any questions, please do ask. We're all here to help you as best as we can. If they're very subject-specific questions, please ask your subject teacher or your head of department for that subject, and they'll be happy to get back to you. If they're more generic questions, please bring them up with your form tutor, your year leaders, or your heads of year, and we'll do our best to answer them for the whole cohort. But it's been a real pleasure to see you back in school over the last few weeks and get back to your face-to-face learning. I know many of you have found this challenging after a long period of lockdown, but it's vital that we all pull together now and do as well as we possibly can to make sure we get those highest grades that will allow you to carry on in the future to whatever ambitions you have. Thank you.